Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Steven Universe Retrospectives, and today we're going to be discussing episodes 147 and 148 of Steven Universe, The Question and Maid of Honor. So, once again, to recap, Steven and the Crystal Gems wound up learning that Rose Quartz was in actuality Pink Diamond. Stephen, Garnet, and Amethyst learned this. Pearl knew the whole time, but was forbidden from telling them. However, once that secret had actually gotten out, Garnet did not take it well, actually unfusing back into Ruby and Sapphire, who both kind of dealt with the news in their own ways, with Sapphire having a full-blown explosion and yelling at Ruby before storming out. While Stephen and Pearl did go after Sapphire and were able to calm her down after they told her the whole story, she quickly realized, oh shit, I effed up with Ruby, and they all went back to the temple, but at that point Ruby had left, leaving a note saying that she ran away. Stephen and Amethyst wound up going to follow her, and after having their own bit of emotional catharsis, they wound up learning that Ruby was at some place called, I think, Brooding Peak, with Greg, having ordered pizza there, and so the pair wound up going there to try and finally confront Ruby, and that's where the question picks up, as the two of them end up arrive at Brooding Peak, as Ruby and Greg are just sitting down and talking. As such, once they arrive, they do end up talking. Ruby asks, well, how'd they get here? And of course, Stephen lets them know, well, we heard you ordered pizza. And it turns out that Ruby has been kind of telling Greg the whole story as well, that Rose was in reality Pink Diamond. And what I like is that it's clear that Greg feels a little odd about it, but he's not taking the news that badly. Mostly because it's Rose that he fell in love with. It was Rose that he was in a relationship with, and Rose whom he had a child with. Ultimately, he may have fallen in Rose. Yeah, he may not have known Rose when she was Pink Diamond, but likewise, Rose never knew him as Gregory DeMeo. She only knew Mr. Universe. So ultimately, it doesn't really, the news that Rose was Pink Diamond doesn't really shake Greg all that much. So kind of like that. But the question ultimately is, how is Ruby doing? After all, she's kind of the one that dealt with the most emotional brunt when the secret came out, because after all, again, Sapphire exploded at her. So maybe she isn't doing so well. However, Ruby seems fine, even stating that she and Greg just kind of talked it out and were just chilling this whole time, which confuses Stephen, but Ruby does continue to elaborate. Specifically, she actually mentions how Sapphire was kind of right, that the only reason that she and Sapphire were Garnet all the time was because Rose told them to be Garnet, telling them to never question what they were, that they belonged together and all that stuff. And so Ruby never once thought about it herself, but now being on her own, she's had time to think for herself, because in her own words, from the moment that she had been created, she's always been mooshed together with someone. But when she was working for the Gem Empire, she was always fused together with a bunch of other rubies to make a bigger ruby. And then likewise, when she left the Gem Empire, she was always fused with Sapphire to make Garnet. So she was always trying to think and consider what Sapphire wanted, what was best for her. But now she's allowed to finally have time to herself. And it's basically just fun. She's allowed to actually think about what she wants to do, not worry about what will make someone else happy. And right now, she's here just eating pizza and reading comic books with Greg, and she's having a blast. She doesn't have to worry if Sapphire would like all this stuff, because she knows she likes it. And as a result, Ruby seems to be kind of having a new lease on life, even stating that she wants to kind of go on her own, that she wants to live her own life, do her own thing, and just kind of go off and be a solo act for a while. Which Greg and Amethyst are like, okay, cool, whatever, but Steven has a bit of a freak out app, because if Ruby wants to be a solo act, then that means that she and Sapphire won't get back together. And if they don't get back together, then there will be no Garnet, and he wants Garnet back. As such, she does start trying to say, come on guys, we gotta find a way to get them back together, but Greg does calm Steven down and tells him that ultimately, it's not their call. And here's the thing. Ruby and Sapphire are Garnet. Two halves of Garnet, but they're still Garnet. And if Ruby and Sapphire don't want to be fused back together, or more specifically, if Ruby doesn't want to get back together, then Garnet doesn't want to get back together. So they ultimately decide that the best way they can let this play out is just to support Ruby in whatever decision she makes. And ultimately, Steven, while Steven is a little uneasy about doing this, he does ultimately comply. But there's still the matter of what's Ruby gonna do? What adventures are she gonna have solo? And at first she says she wants to have adventures similar to a comic called Dolphin Tales, which is clearly meant to be a parody of DuckTales. But Steven thinks that maybe if she wants to be all freedom and open range and exploring and all that, then maybe, just maybe, she could emulate another comic character called Lonesome Lasso, which is ultimately the reason why she became a cowboy. Sorry, I'm adjusting the camera because it got shaken. But yeah, Ruby takes to that completely, and so as a result, they decide that if she's gonna be a cowboy, she needs to find some open plains, and Greg knows just the place. As such, after everyone gets into Greg's van and they stop to give Ruby some cowboy clothes, they all go out to this open field, and to try and complete the cowboy ensemble, Amethyst ends up shapeshifting into a horse for Ruby to ride on, and from there, they just go around having some fun adventures, exploring the terrain, seeing all these things. And Ruby herself is having a blast because, like I said, she's now making her own decisions. Again, sorry, Chinny keeps shaking the bed. But yeah, she's making her own decisions. She's making her own mistakes. She's just living her own life. And this even leads to this honestly pretty chill song called Ruby Rider, which is about Ruby singing about how she's riding all by her lonesome. She doesn't need anybody. She's just having her own adventures. It's, again, pretty nice song, and it really does fit for a Western motif, which, again, fits because Ruby's trying to be a cowboy here. Even during the song, Ruby tries corralling a buffalo, and the buffalo just ends up chasing her, Amethyst, Greg, and Steven around. But ultimately, Steven's impressed how quickly Ruby's able to take to all this, and realizes maybe this is the best. Let her just have this for herself. If she's happy this way, then why not just let her stay that way? However, as night falls and everyone goes to sleep, Steven does wake up and does notice Ruby just kind of sitting on a rock, and he does express how, yeah, he was worried that Ruby and Sapphire wouldn't get back together, but he's happy to see Ruby happy. That is till Ruby reveals something. She lied. Yeah, the whole song about her needing nobody, yeah, she was talking out of her ass. While she admits that she did have fun today and when she and the group just went around doing all the cowboy shenanigans, she ultimately still never could get Sapphire out of her head. She was still thinking about her, and while she did enjoy herself, she also kept thinking, how fun would this be if I could share it with her? And yeah, basically, she still misses Sapphire. And even she's kind of grumpy over the fact that she's still thinking about her despite the fact that she wants to be on her own. As such, Steven finally does come in and actually does talk to Ruby and about how that's normal. That's fine. It's okay for her to miss Sapphire like that. Even going back to the Lonesome Lasso comic, he mentions how, though he's called Lonesome Lasso, because he misses someone. He has a girl back at home that he's waiting for, yet he's still a rootin' tootin' cowboy. And the same thing goes to Ruby here. Yeah, she misses Sapphire, but she's still the same person who went out and did all this stuff. She still can have fun and still miss Sapphire, which I think is honestly pretty sweet, and for both sides for that matter. As I do like seeing Steven helping Ruby kind of help reach this emotional catharsis, and I like that Ruby in a way does reach it or kind of comes to that conclusion first, because ultimately, she in a way she's right. It is nice to have some independence have independence and enjoy time for yourself. But by that same token, she and Sapphire did genuinely care about each other. Yes, part of the major reasons why they were guarded all the time was because Rose told them never to question it. But they did genuinely love one another, and we see that reflected in Ruby here. She talks about how she spent so much time with Sapphire, and how she mentions how it was like Sapphire's smile was like her smile. Like she feels Sapphire's smile as if it were her smile. And I like that. It's sweet. And as a result, Ruby does kind of come to her own conclusion. She does want to go back to Sapphire, but she doesn't want things to go back to being exactly as they were. After all, again, she doesn't want them to just be like they have to be together because someone else told them to be together. She wants it to be sure that it's their decision, that ultimately they're not just mushed together for convenience's sake. And Steven thinks he may have a way to help with that, as he actually does bring up the Lonesome Lasso comic one more time and directs Ruby to a specific page. As such, the episode cuts ahead to later as Steven ends up returning to the temple as Pearl and Sapphire are still consoling one another. And what I like is that we do see they have like 2 cups of, I think, tea on standby. So they were clearly just having some. So they were clearly still trying to keep themselves from going overboard. But when Steven arrives, Sapphire just immediately says, "Did you find Ruby? She here?" And Steven says she's outside and she has something she wants to say to you. As such, Sapphire goes outside and she sees Ruby riding in on Amethyst, who's still shapeshifted as a horse. And so, as Sapphire goes down and just apologizing up and down to Ruby about how she's sorry, how she didn't mean all those terrible things, Ruby just says, "No, I think you were right." And so she jumps off Amethyst and just kind of tells her to go with a little cowboy tap tap. And so after that, Ruby just says, "Someone once said that we were the answer, but I don't think I believe that anymore. At least not till I hear it from you." As such, she gestures for Sapphire's hand. Sapphire gives it, and Ruby takes a knee with Sapphire's hand in hers. As such, the wind ends up throwing off Ruby's cowboy hat, and Ruby asks a simple question: "Sapphire, will you marry me?" Which even Sapphire's like, "What?" And yeah, essentially that's the solution. Ruby does still want to be with Sapphire, but if they're married, then this will be their call. And then as a result, it'll mean that even if they're separated, they'll still be together. They'll still be an important part of each other's lives. And ultimately she wants to make sure that Sapphire's okay with it. And Sapphire, she says yes. She accepts it. And so Ruby calls out Yahoo, embraces her in a hug, and they just start smooching. It's adorable. As such, the episode ends with the rest of the crystal gems on standby as Steven just kind of smiles as he holds up the picture of Lonesome Lasso and Sally Mae and his girl Sally Mae getting married. So there you go. And of course, that actually leads directly into the next episode, Maid of Honor, since, if Ruby and Sapphire are getting married, you gotta plan the wedding. So, of course, and it turns out Steven's the wedding planner, and he's actually been planning this thing for a while. It's never stated that he was always hoping that this would happen, but it's Steven. As we've stated many episodes prior, he loves schmaltz, so it wouldn't be surprising if he planned out weddings in advance, even if it weren't specifically for any of the crystal gems. And so he's got so he just basically got a whole book of wedding plans and designs for invitations on standby. So he's just going all in on this thing. Hold on one second. Sorry, I was getting distracted by Chindy. Like that, she's just jumped off the bed. Come on over here, Chindy. Come on, get over here. But yeah, like I said, with the wedding, with Steven helping to plan the wedding, the crystal gems all start getting invitations ready for all the denizens of Beach City, with Peridot even helping out, and of course complaining up a storm because it's menial labor. But however, Sapphire kind of gets a little forlorn when they finish getting the invitations ready, because ultimately all they have are 10 invitations, which I'm guessing is meant to encompass all the families of Beach City as well. But yeah, that's still a very low number. And even when they're getting to the wedding rehearsal, getting the wedding rehearsal ready, as they have the stand where they're going to be doing the I do's, have a bunch of fold out chairs for all the guests and so forth. Well, Sapphire's not exactly doing well, mostly because with this being such an important moment, she's starting to realize just how many of their friends aren't going to be there to see it. About all the crystal gems that are corrupted and bubbled beneath the temple. Which, yeah, when Ruby hears this, she tries to say, well, maybe we could just bring the bubbles up here, but Sapphire just shoots it down, saying no, it'd be too dangerous. So essentially, Ruby and Sapphire do just share a moment of sadness as they realize none of their crystal gem friends are going to actually be there. And this does get to Steven, so much so that as he's writing up names of people who will be attending the event, he looks to the temple entrance and realizes there is someone that he can bring there. And so he writes one more name for the attendees of the wedding: Bismuth. As such, Steven ends up going into the temple and manages to reach the heart, wherein he finds the bubble containing Bismuth's gem And, well, after taking a breath and kind of prepping himself, he pops the bubble and steps away, allowing Bismuth to reform. Yeah, we end up seeing her new outfit. It's not exactly the same, but I dig it. It still kind of looks like still looks like the strong person that Bismuth typically is, while also still kind of fitting with her blacksmith motif. But yeah, Bismuth reforms, and and after regaining her composure, she quickly realizes that Steven's the one who let her out, and her first question is, why the hell did you let me out? I just tried to shatter you. Of course, so as such, Steven, of course, tries to explain everything to her about how Bismuth and Rose had their disagreement about how to handle the war, but before Steven can get too much into detail, Bismuth sees all the bubbled gems around the room and jumps to the conclusion that Rose apparently bubbled all these other gems because they disagreed with her, which Steven tries telling her no, that's not the case, but Bismuth ain't listening, especially when she sees a few familiar faces in there, including one for a gem named Biggs, who she says, Biggs is a beloved by everybody, and so she immediately jumps to Biggs's bubble, pops it, and as Biggs starts reforming, she says, come on, Biggs, let's go free everyone else. But the thing is, you gotta remember, almost every gem in there is corrupted. And so when Biggs reforms, she ends up reforming back into one of those monsters that Steven and the gems had faced in the tundra. You know, those gems that Jasper essentially recruited into her army that one time. Yeah, it gets out, and Bismuth is just shocked to see it. As such, Biggs attempts to attack Bismuth, but Steven runs in and throws up a bubble to stop it, and when Bismuth is just kind of standing there awestruck, Steven just immediately apologizes to Jasper, apologizes to Bismuth, telling her, look, I'm sorry, this isn't the Biggs you know, look, a lot's happened, and I want to tell you that, but ultimately, Biggs keeps attacking the bubble until eventually it breaks. However, Bismuth and Steven are not crushed. As it turns out, Bismuth has kind of gotten over her initial shock and is now on the attack, though she clearly doesn't want to do it as there are tears running down her eyes. But either way, she manages to go in for the kill and manages to slice Biggs in half, poofing her. As such, Steven is able to quickly rebubble Biggs while leaving Bismuth behind him, who's just on her knees, just crying, saying that only a diamond could do this bit much damage. It was pink, wasn't it? Why didn't Rose stop her? And so from there, Steven finally tells Bismuth the truth, that Rose Quartz was pink diamond. And so after Steven tells her the whole story off screen, Bismuth says when Steven asks if she's okay, she's like, yeah, I'm fine. Excuse me 1 second. And as such, she walks over to the little pool of lava in the center of the room, dunks her head in, and then just screams, which, I love that. It's a very, very, very realistic reaction. I dig it. As such, Bismuth continues freaking out about this, and so to try and calm herself down, she dips her feet in the lava, and she invites Steven over to sit with her. And from there, we get a genuinely nice moment as Bismuth kind of reflects on why Rose bubbled her, because after all, part of the reason Rose did it was because Bismuth showed her the breaking point. And so Bismuth begins thinking about how, wow, I was so excited to show that to her, told her about how awesome, hey, look, Rose, here's this weapon, here's this weapon to shatter diamonds, I want to shatter you with it. And yeah, this leads to an honestly really good moment. She says, I thought all our problems would be solved if we just shattered a diamond. Guess she followed my advice. Which I'll get back to when I get to my thoughts on the episode, but I think it's a very poignant moment which just kind of puts all of Bismuth's values kind of in perspective, as well as her conflict with Rose. But again, we'll get back to that. Either way, this bit of connection Steven does show that he's there for her, which she very much appreciates. And as a result, with Steven there kind of giving her a helping hand, Bismuth does kind of calm down. Bismuth does kind of calm down and even says, thanks for being there for me. As such, with all the conflict now resolved, Steven tells Bismuth that he wants her there for Garnet's wedding, which is the whole reason he came down here in the first place. Which Bismuth's like, oh, wedding, okay, sure. Which, funny thing too, when she learns that Garnet broke up over this whole thing, she's like, no, they're my favorite couple. But either way, yeah. Steven invites Bismuth to the wedding, and Bismuth says, okay, sure, that sounds fun. So what's a wedding? But either way, yeah, Steven brings her out of the temple and does let her know how everything's gonna go. And they see the gems out on the beach, getting everything set up. And at first, Bismuth's all like, well, I guess I should go say hi to them. But Steven doesn't want to do that, even throwing a sheet over her head, saying that they got to make it a surprise. He's got to set her up and all that stuff, and says that if you're going to come to the wedding, you might need you need to prepare. He even gives her a gift. He even shows her the gift registry for the thing. And what I love is that apparently Ruby and Sapphire for the gift registry apparently want to get a home version of the game Elite Meat Beat Mania. It's hilarious. I dig it. I dig that. But either way, Bismuth's also shocked that the rest of the gems don't know that she's coming back. This was all Steven's idea. And so while Steven assures her that it'll be fine, everything will be good, he'll just set her up. Hell, they maybe even want her to be maid of honor. Bismuth still seems a little forlorn. And so even as Steven leaves the house and goes to party with the gems, he does try and she's still clearly not exactly all there. But either way, Steven does try doing a toast and tries setting Bismuth up to come out and greet all the other gems, but she doesn't take the bait, as he keeps raising up their cans of soda and saying, yeah, so we're all happy to see this happen, including... And nothing happens. And after doing this a couple times, Steven wonders what the heck's going on, so he just tells everyone to wait right there, don't drop their cans, while he goes to check and see what's going on. But when he goes back into the house... Bismuth is nowhere to be found, and the blanket that he threw over her is on the floor and right near the warp pad. As such, Steven kind of has figured out where Bismuth is, and so he ends up warping to the forge, which, yep, that's where Bismuth is, just going away making weapons. And so Steven wants to know why she ran away, and it turns out Bismuth believes that nobody wants her around anymore. Because after all, if any of them wanted to actually see her, they could have just let her out on their own, and yet it was Steven who had to be the one that let her out. And she kind of cites that she understands why they wouldn't want to let her out, because after all, she attacked their leader. Which Steven just says, look, they're not going to side with Rose anymore. But no, Bismuth says no. She's not talking about Rose. She's talking about Steven. Steven is pretty much the leader. And while Steven tries denying, they say, no, Garnet's the leader. It's like, oh, where's Garnet? Where's Garnet? Who's the one holding them all together? Someone's giving them all hope, and that person is you, Steven. And it's like, and I attacked you. It's actually pretty much it's clear that she's just in a bit of depression. That basically she says, like, she's not dense. She knows they want her in a bubble. They want Steven out, and she understands that. She knows when she's not wanted, and it's just getting to her. However, what I even love is that Bismuth exemplifies it by saying she blew it, which is a little heartbreaking in a sense, but Steven once again comforts her, saying that he doesn't matter. They don't have to do this big surprise anymore. If she just shows up with Steven and Steven lets her know it's all right, then they'll forgive her. If the only reason they kept her in a bubble is for Steven's safety, then if Steven's then ultimately they should care. Steven wants her back on the team. Which even Bismuth's like, what, you want me back on the team? It's like, yeah, I do. And it's a really nice scene as Steven once again reconnects with Bismuth and convinces her just to come back, and they'll go back together, and Steven will vouch for her, which, again, it's a really nice moment, and Steven does manage to convince Bismuth to come back with him. As such, they end up warping back to Steven's house, where the gems are now gathered around a coffee table, still holding their drinks, but when Steven arrives with Bismuth, yeah, they're all so shocked they all drop their drinks, with the exception of Peridot, who has no idea who the hell Bismuth is. As such, after Bismuth awkwardly tries to give an introduction using one of her signature catchphrases that Steven suggests, Steven tells them all that he wanted to invite Bismuth, and it's just all tense and weird as Ruby, Sapphire, and Pearl walk up to Bismuth, and after a moment of silence, they all just tackle her in a hug, happy to see her still, which I like. And so they immediately just apologize up to high heaven about not talking to her about this, and she says, it's okay, Steven explained everything to me. And while Peridot was still wondering who the heck this is, Amethyst just tells her back, let them just have this. And so the episode ends with Bismuth saying, I heard you guys are getting married, and Steven told me I had to bring gifts, and he said that these two things would be good for you. And so she opens up her palm, and it turns out she made wedding rings, which Ruby and Sapphire see, and they exclaim that they love them, hugging Bismuth even further and ending the episode on a honestly schmaltzy but happy note. So, there you go. That was the question in Maid of Honor. My thoughts on these episodes? Well, first, let's talk about The Question. The Question is once again another follow-up episode, but this one kind of deals with more of the rising action, so to speak. Whereas the previous episodes really were dealing with the emotional consequences of learning that Rose was Pink Diamond, this one kind of deals with the fallout from the fallout, so to speak. More specifically with Ruby, because here's the thing. While I do enjoy Garnet as a character, and it's always fun to see Ruby and Sapphire around, a consequence of Ruby and Sapphire constantly being Garnet is that the pair of them don't tend to get a lot of character moments with them being put in the spotlight. There are occasional episodes where they're there, but most of the conflicts in that episode usually tend to resolve around the whatever's causing them to unfuse in the first place, and likewise, the romantic tension the pair of them have when they are around. Like, for example, in the Keystone Motel episode where they unfused because of what Pearl did. Basically the whole conflict there was mostly residing in how they had lost faith in Pearl and how that kind of put a wedge in their relationship as both of them were trying to deal with it in different ways. And then likewise in the Hit the Diamond episode, the tension for there was because they were kind of screwing up the whole plan because they were kept flirting with one another, and then likewise with the heist, with Heist and That Will Be All, the conflict there was just trying to maintain their cover so that no one realized that they were spies there to break a human out of the zoo. So in that sense, so really, while Ruby and Sapphire do have definable characters, we don't really have any episodes dealing with them as characters. We don't really know their arcs. Any arcs they typically have are shared with Garnet because they are Garnet. But a consequence of that is that we don't really get a chance to see anything that any issues that they have as characters, because usually any issues they have all tie back into Garnet. So it's nice in a way to have episodes that actually focus on them and their issues, like in the Now We're Only Falling Apart episode, where Sapphire had her freak out and had to be kind of talked down by Pearl and Steven to make her realize that ultimately that while what Rose did was selfish and short-sighted, she wasn't doing it out of a sense of maliciousness, that she genuinely did try to do the right thing, even if she wasn't going about it the right way. So I do like that. And so likewise, The Question, I think, is a good character piece for Ruby, which I kind of like how the little snippets we get of Ruby as a solo act in the story, because from what we've seen of Ruby's and Gem hierarchy, they're basically just grunt soldiers. They're not the big guns, but they're there if you just need basic security, and they work the way they do because you tend to get a cluster of them whenever you need to guard someone. We saw that in the episode The Answer, when the Ruby we know was paired with two other Rubies to guard Sapphire, and the big thing with them was that whenever they needed to go into conflict, they would fuse into one giant Ruby. We even saw that with the Ruby Squad in the episodes that they showed up in, as when they realized that they were dealing with a threat, the five of them merged into one giant Ruby. Ultimately, the whole point of having Ruby guards at all is because by them individually they're not much of a problem, but together they can be a force to be reckoned with. So in essence, and so likewise, when you kind of deal with that from our Ruby's perspective, her whole life has always been as just the support for someone else. When she was with the Gem Empire, she was constantly she always had to work alongside other Rubies to build a much stronger Ruby, to be able to, defend her targets, fight back against anyone, and so on and so forth. And then likewise as she said, when she wound up defecting to join the Crystal Gems, it was a similar case. In a different manner, but it was a similar case, as she and Sapphire were always fused together to make Garnet. And so as a result, while she loved being Garnet, the whole thing with being Garnet was that she was always there to support Sapphire. She and Sapphire always had to work in tandem. And yes, while it was like a partnership, because Sapphire supported her as well, ultimately, the thing with fusions is that what makes them so unique is that you're merging two people together. Your thoughts and someone else's thoughts intermingle and create an entirely new being, a new personality. And so even if Ruby and Sapphire were supporting each other when they were making Garnet, Garnet was not either of them. Garnet was Garnet. So now this is Ruby's chance to be herself, not be mushed together with other Rubies, or become part of another fusion that was meant to be an intermingling of two entirely separate personalities. She's alone, all by herself. And what I like about that is that we see what she does when given this individuality. And how she reacts is kind of in character with how we've seen Ruby react throughout the series. She's excitable, she's energetic, she wants to explore the unknown, see that which she has not discovered yet. And it's actually pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting because it gives us more of a chance to let her take the spotlight. And like with Steven, we're worried that she won't get back together with Sapphire because, well, we like Garnet. And if Ruby and Sapphire don't get back together, there's no Garnet. But at the same time, what kind of works for the episode is that the choice for Ruby to go back to Sapphire is never forced on her. While Steven is worried that they won't get back together because he wants Garnet back, but at the end, Greg is right. The call to get Ruby and Sapphire back together cannot be made by Steven, Greg, Amethyst, or anybody. This has to be something that Ruby and Sapphire can agree to. They can't just do it because someone else said go back to being Garnet. If they want to go back to being Garnet, it has to be something they both agree to. And so likewise, if either half of the fusion does not want to be Garnet, then Garnet's not coming back. And so likewise, throughout the episode, having Ruby be the one that says I want to go back to Sapphire, I think that works. I think that's nice. And I like the journey she takes to getting to that revelation, because essentially her need to be an individual kind of goes hand in hand with her desire to still be Sapphire. Because here's the thing. Going back to how she and Sapphire were Garnet, in a way, like I said, Ruby and Sapphire were kind of right that ultimately the whole reason they were Garnet was because Rose told them to be Garnet. Because she told them, while they do love each other and enjoy being Garnet, the only reason they stayed Garnet for so long was because Rose told them, never question this, embrace it, accept this. And they accepted it because it was something strange and new, but they liked it and they wanted to keep it going. And part of the faith that held Garnet together was because Ruby and Sapphire so implicitly trusted Rose. And likewise, what led to their separation here was the revelation that Rose was lying to them from day one. So in other words, for them to come back together, it has to be something that can't be just forced on them. They have to make that decision on their own. And what I like is that Ruby and Sapphire, in their own ways, do decide to go back together. Like in the case of Sapphire, what led to her wanting to go back to Ruby was when she thought about all the time they spent together, and comparing their relationship to Pearl and Rose's. How Rose wanted to stay on Earth because Pearl kind of swept her off her feet. How she was happy on Earth with her, and it made her that's how it was with me and Ruby. And so that made her realize, I want to be back with Ruby. And likewise, on Ruby's case, what led her wanting to go back to Sapphire? She genuinely missed her. She liked spending time with her. She liked sharing those experiences with her. And while she did enjoy being on her own and doing her own thing as a cowboy, by that same token, even she was like, I want her back. I want to share all this with her. I still want to be with her. But what ultimately what I think makes the journey worth it in the end is that Ruby wants to ensure that if she and Sapphire get back together, it has to be on their terms. It can't just be because someone wants Garnet back. It can't just be because, that's the status quo. It has to be because they want that to be the case. And being Garnet has to be their call. Which, again, fits back into the whole wanting to be an individual thing. While Ruby does want to go back to being Garnet, she still would love to explore being by herself, still doing her own thing, while still knowing that Sapphire is there for her, and that no matter where she goes, at least there's someone that she can come back home to, that she can spend time with, that she can care about. And so that's what leads, and as a result, having Steven pretty much just say, "Why don't you get married?" I feel like is a good call. I like it, and it's honestly pretty sweet seeing Ruby propose to Sapphire, and I love how big doughy eyed she is when she says it. She's just smiling. There's sparkles in her eyes. It's basically just saying, even if we're apart, we'll still be together. I like that. It's genuinely sweet, kind, and I love the path that we take to get there. Having Ruby essentially decide, which again works for their character arcs, because at the end of the day, if this is a decision they have to come to, it has to be a decision they come to individually, which I think is a good way of kind of expanding Ruby and Sapphire's character arc, and in a way, it makes the relationship a lot healthier. I'm not saying that the relationship was bad before, but like I said, part of the reason they kept it going for so long was because they were told to just keep doing it. And then likewise again, and now with the truth now out there, it allows their relationship to evolve into something better than what it was before. So again, it's good stuff. I dig it. It's sweet, and again, big deal plot wise as Ruby and Sapphire are getting married, which I'll get to talking about that when the episode with the wedding actually comes up. But needless to say, yeah, that was a big turning point in terms of children's cartoons, and it had consequences for Steven Universe. But again, we'll get to that when we get to that. Overall, though, the question is a nice, sweet, homey, fun episode. And while I like Ruby's journey throughout the episode, it is also kind of nice just seeing her moseying along as a cowboy, exploring the terrains and the fields. There was honestly one genuinely funny scene where Greg, Steven, and Amethyst encounter giant bush, and when she decides to step through, she's like, I don't know what's on the other side, but I'm gonna find out. She steps through. Then you hear screaming, and when they look to check, there's a gorge there. I love it. It's funny. But overall, yeah, I think the question is a genuinely sweet episode that, again, kind of goes back into giving Ruby and Sapphire their own character arcs that, again, do kind of, which I admit, in retrospect, do still feed into Garnet, but I think feeds into Garnet in a way that still allows Ruby and Sapphire to kind of grow as their own individual characters. So, I dig it. It's nice, and I dig it. It's nice, and overall, just pretty sweet. But then, of course, let's talk about. But of course, we need to talk about my thoughts on Maid of Honor. And honestly, the episode's fine. Yeah, it's for me. Maid of Honor is just fine. Not too fantastic, but nothing god awful either. Which, yeah, when the episode first premiered, apparently reactions to it were not very positive. People were like, "What the heck?" It's like, well, that wasn't really that good compared to the other episodes, and I agree. But I don't think Maid of Honor is a bad episode by any means. In the grand scheme of the whole arc of reuniting Ruby and Sapphire, it's a filler episode mostly. The biggest contributing plot factor to the overarching plot to the ongoing plot that we're getting is that Bismuth is brought out of her bubble in preparation for Ruby and Sapphire's wedding, which it's a nice little thing because it is cool seeing Bismuth joining back up with the Crystal Gems, but many people kind of had complaints with how Bismuth's character arc was handled in the episode, because after all, she kind of flipped her switch like that. Whereas with other gems that that everybody's had to win over to their side, it's at least taken a few episodes, or in the case of Lapis, whole seasons, just to get her character arc going. So for Bismuth to just kind of turn like that, many people thought it wasn't really earned or was kind of rushed. And believe it or not, I disagree with that opinion. Mostly because we know Bismuth. And unlike other gems that the Crystal Gems have had to win over to their side, like with Peridot and Lapis, Bismuth was already a Crystal Gem. And before you say, well, she disagreed with their methods, and she tried to kill Rose, and then she tried to kill Steven, yes, I admit that those were bad things, but the thing is, Bismuth genuinely does not mean the Crystal Gems any harm. Yes, what she did her attacking Steven was an emotional response, but counter argument, Rose trapped her in a bubble for thousands of years And then when she finally woke up, she learned, oh, Rose never told anyone what actually happened, and then ran away so she could disappear and give birth to this kid who has no memory of what this is. And then likewise, when Steven showed some kind of similarity to Rose by refusing to use the breaking point, that kind of led her to unintentionally transferring all her rage onto Steven, because she began believing, like all the other gems that have tried to kill Steven in the past, that Steven was just Rose in a new suit of armor, so to speak. So, yeah. So, yeah. But the thing about Bismuth is this. She cares. She genuinely does care about the crystal gems. Now, ultimately, her methods are extreme. They're on the outliers of what the crystal gems should be aiming to do, as she was advocating for shattering any gems that disagreed with them or were their enemies, and so to speak. But the thing with Bismuth is, she in her debut episode, we learned a lot about her character, and what we learned of her character does kind of showcase that she would be one to kind of have her redemption arc be a very quick one. Because let's review the Bismuth episode. More specifically, the bits and pieces of it that showcase Bismuth's character and how that character would be one to let kind of change her mind so easily. First off, Bismuth as a character cared deeply about the crystal gems. When she was brought out of Lion's Mane, the instant she saw Garnet and Pearl, she just embraced them in a hug and was just so happy to see them. She was joking around, goofing off, and immediately after she was welcomed back into the crystal gems, she was just going around gallivanting, training, making them new weapons, socializing with the new members of the gems, with Steven and Amethyst. She very much cared about the crystal gems, and when she learned about the Gem War and how many people's lives were lost in it, it kind of broke her, and she started crying because she deeply cared about her friends and how the conflict essentially took so much away from her. And the thing is, as a result, it really does showcase that despite her more extreme methods, she did care about the crystal gems. We even see that in the episode, as when she was woken up and learned that none of the crystal gems, that Steven was the one that let her out of the bubble, and her friends were not doing a thing to get her out of it. She was like, they don't want me anymore. And it breaks her heart because she genuinely believes she fucked up, that she attacked someone that they all genuinely cared about, and now they don't want to be friends with her anymore. And it hurts her inside because she genuinely thinks they don't want me around anymore. And the fact that she's distancing herself, it showcases a very big thing with her. Her loyalty to her friends. She wants them to be happy. She wants them to be living their best lives. And kind of going back to that, that's another thing that worked in Bismuth's favor. She embraced the Crystal Gems mantra of becoming a better version of yourself, to keep growing and changing and learning new things about yourself. And we saw that in her first initial episode. When she first met Steven, she wasn't acting out. She didn't get angry at him and go, "Who are you? What am I doing here?" and all that crap. She instead said, "Whoa, it's okay. I mean you no harm. Look, I think I'm kind of stuck here. Do you think you can help me out?" And likewise, when Steven let her out, she was very sociable with him, very nice. And when she learned that Steven was Rose's son, while she clearly was a little on edge with him, she kind of got over that rather quickly when she learned, oh, you're not Rose. And throughout the episode, and as such, throughout the entire episode, she was trying to get to know the rest of the crystal gems more. And while there were hints of her more violent nature, she never once badmouthed any of the soft methods that Steven liked to employ. When Steven was clearly on edge with being part of training, and he suggested, maybe we could do some of my traditions, instead of blowing them off and going, why should we do that? She happily did them. She wanted to experience these things that Steven loved. Again, sorry, Chini's jumping on the bed. And she happily did all these things. She played a game of cards and had a good time. She wanted to make a pizza with him. She sat down and watched TV with him and the crystal gems because this is something Steven wanted to do. And then likewise, when he offered her the chance to sleep, she's like, you know what? I'm going gonna try it. Again, we see that Bismuth actually embraces the whole culture of the crystal gems becoming a better people, and she does that with everyone else too. When going back to the Bismuth episode, when Steven was having doubts about being in Rose's shadow, Bismuth was the one to try and raise his hopes up, let him know, look, you don't have to be Rose. You can be your own gem. You can be your own person. You could probably even be better than she was. She did, and that, like I said in that episode, there was no malicious intent behind her saying those words to Steven. Sorry, again, Shindy knocked my light down. She genuinely had no ill intent. She was actually trying to encourage Steven. Again, hold on a second. Sorry, let Chindy out of the room. But like I said, she was actually genuinely trying to encourage Steven and bring out the best parts of him. And yeah, and even after she wound up going rogue and wound up attacking Steven because she actually thought he was Rose in disguise, when Steven wound up having to poof her and he assured her he would tell the truth to the rest of the gems. The last words she said before being reduced to just her gemstone was just, and you really are better than her. Even in her final moments, she was trying to assure Steven that he wasn't Rose, that he could be his own self. As a result, from her very first appearance, we are showcased a gem who is loyal to the gem's cause, who can be kind, who is very capable, very accepting of things that are not very accepting of ideas and methods that are not her own, willing to try them out and happily doing them, and because it's something new and interesting, and she even goes as far as to be there for her teammates. She is happy when she sees Pearl and Garnet again. She just happily embraces them like old friends. And when she met Amethyst and Steven, she didn't really like, oh, you're the new recruits, huh? You're not regular members. She's like, oh, new recruits, happy to meet you. She was genuinely happy to have them be a part of the team. And likewise, in that same method, she essentially practiced what she preached. She encouraged other people to step out of their comfort zone, but not in a way that felt like she was forcing it on them. She actually talked them through and gave helpful advice, like with Steven, showcasing that not only does she have an open mind when it comes to things that are different from her, but by that same token, she's willing to help out her friends if she believes they need her. Which is why I think that her quick redemption arc in Maid of Honor actually works. Because unlike with other gems that we've had to win over to the good guy's side, she's already most of the way there. Here's the thing. The only reason that she was an antagonist in her first appearance was because she disagreed on how to deal with their enemies. The crystal gems would fight the enemies and then entrap them, or in the case of Steven, try to win them over. Whereas Bismuth was essentially operated in absolutes, saying they want to destroy us because we don't think the same way, we need to take them down because they won't give us any other option. And as a result, it led her to going to extreme methods, and again, that all came from a place of she cared about her friends and she didn't want to see them harmed. I'm not defending her actions, but it did still come from her loyalty to her friends. But likewise, what makes it, I think, work, in my opinion, is that when she's woken up from being poofed in the Bismuth episode, she is shown the direct consequences of her thinking. Because here's the thing. While Pink Diamond was never really shattered, to the eyes of literally every other gem out there, to crystal gems, homeworld gems, or diamonds alike, Pink Diamond was shattered, and Rose was content to let everyone think that, and she went through with that plan, all because she thought that if Pink Diamond was gone, then the homeworld gems would just run away and abandon Earth, leaving it for the crystal gems. But the thing about doing that, because she let everyone believe that Pink Diamond was shattered, it wound up pushing the remaining diamonds to use methods that they would not have gone gone to before. In this case, raising the entire planet with that white light, and essentially corrupting every single gem on Earth, save for Rose, Garnet, and Pearl, who only managed to make it out okay because of Rose's shield. So in other words, by following Bismuth's advice and shattering Pink Diamond, it led to all of Bismuth's friends facing the consequences. And as I've established, if there's anything that Bismuth holds true, it's her friends. It's the crystal gems. She is loyal to them above all else. And so learning that essentially her plan led to them all getting hurt and now facing such damage to their very beings that they may never recover. Imagine that. Imagine that. Imagine knowing that your methods hurt the people you cared about most, and you're just seeing it just thrown in your face. It's gotta hurt. It's gotta shake you up. And that probably can feed right back into why Bismuth takes the action she does in the episode. Because in a way, maybe she wants punishment. Not just for attacking Steven, but for advocating for such an extreme method and seeing the consequences of that method in action. It's good. And it makes for some genuinely nice character growth and drama for Bismuth. And again, feeding back into how Bismuth accepts the whole crystal gem idea of accepting new ideas, combining that with the trauma of seeing the consequences of shattering Pink Diamond, I think that would make sense why she would have such a quick redemption, because she already cared about the crystal gems, and learning that, and essentially just learning this hard truth and seeing the consequences made her realize it was never a good idea, was it? It actually would have hurt. It actually did hurt more people than it helped, and that ultimately is what makes her realize I kind of need to work on myself. And I like that. And like I said, we already had her most of the way there. She was already friends with the crystal gems. She already cared about their well-being. And the thing is, just before she was pooped, Bismuth did come to terms that Steven was not Rose. Hell, when she first woke up, when she first reformed herself, when she first saw Steven, she's like, Rose, no, Steven. Because she had to remind herself, no, he's not Rose. He is not Rose Quartz. And she did not attack him. She kind of went off and said, why the hell did you let me out? I just tried to kill you. But then as the episode continued on, and Steven defended her, helped her, she kind of had to, basically any beef that she had with him, it was clearly water under the bridge. And the fact that Steven was so willing to accept her, it leads to some genuinely good drama, because Bismuth kind of has to deal more with the guilt of having attacked this kid who did nothing to her. And with her having to realize that Steven was completely innocent, of course, that's probably going to hurt like hell. And combine that with the fact that, well, she knows the crystal gems know what she did. That she attacked Steven. Because she believes Steven when he says, I'll tell everyone. And he did tell everyone. And so, as a result of that, combine that with her loyalty she had to her friends already, she pretty much decides, I can't be with everyone anymore because I did something just unforgivable, which goes back into her character development, because it essentially, in her mind, she's the bad guy. She is the person that the crystal gems are fighting against. And basically in her mind, she thinks, I need to just stay away from them. I'm no good. I am not a crystal gem. I am not worthy of standing by their side and fighting for this cause. I didn't even do a good job representing it. But it's ultimately Steven's kind words that help bring her back, because Steven assures her they had a disagreement, but they resolved that. And ultimately, Steven accepting Bismuth is what kind of helps her heal herself, because after all, he's the kid that she tried to kill. And the fact that this kid is just saying, it's fine, I want you back, I want you to be there for them, it probably helps ease a lot of the pain she's going through, because after all, the whole reason she left was because she cared about her friends and she thought she was the enemy. And the reason she thought she was the enemy was because she attacked Steven. Because she attacked Steven because of her ideals. So now learning that Steven didn't even deserve that, and that the consequences of her actions resulted in things just getting worse for the crystal gems, again, it would hurt like hell. But for Steven to offer that one hand of friendship and tell her, I want you back, it kind of helped ease her fears. It allowed her to probably forgive herself more and, yes, become smarter. Realize that there have to be other ways, that they should not be resorting to those methods, that if they truly want to win and protect the crystal gems and the earth, then they need to be better. They need to be better people. And the first step is forgiveness. And it's good. I like it. Again, I'm going way too deep into this because I have to really get into why I think Bismuth's arc actually works in the episode and why I think it actually works well and because it's being rushed. Because I understand. I do understand. Like I said, Peridot and Lapis did not just have their switches flipped like that. It took time for them to reach the points that they were that they could even become friends with the crystal gems, or in the case of Lapis, just be on speaking terms. So likewise but for Bismuth, I believe her redemption works because, like I said, she was already most of the way there. She just needed a little push, and that little push was being shown the consequences of her actions and kind of needing that little bit of self-reflection. She already cared about the crystal gems, and she already wholeheartedly embraced their methods of growing and expanding and bringing out the best parts of yourself just because that's what you want to do. That, I think, she already had that part down pat. She just needed to be shown that her methods were not the best, that her methods, unfortunately, were not going to work. And what better way to showcase that than by showing all of her friends corrupted because of that mindset, which again I think is good. I like it. It leads to some good stuff, and quite frankly, I already like Bismuth as a character. So to actually have her back as an official member of the Crystal Gems, I dig it. Because yeah, that she's back for good. She's not going to get poofed again. She's not going to be like, psych, I was a bad guy again the whole time. No, she genuinely is remorseful and is now is trying to earn her way back to her friend's sides. I like it. It's nice. It's sweet. Has good stuff. And while I will admit, Maid of Honor is not a great episode because, again, in terms of plot, it doesn't really expand a lot. It doesn't really do much to expand on it. I do still think it's a decent episode. It's nice to see Bismuth back. It's nice to see her officially be a part of the gems again and learn from her mistakes. It's nice to see her and Steven reconcile, and the ending where the rest of the crystal gems just happily embrace Bismuth in a hug, let her know we already forgive you, you're our friend, and we care about you. It's nice, it's sweet, and overall, it's just a good time. So yeah, on the whole, the question. Good episode. Offers some genuinely good character stuff for Ruby that does feed more. That does actually feed more into Garnet while still allowing Ruby and Sapphire their own individual arcs to lead them back to that moment. And then likewise, Maid of Honor, well, not a great episode. I think is a decent episode, and actually I think does deserve more credit than it's given by the fans. So on the whole, one honestly pretty touching episode, one decent episode that I think deserves more grace. So yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I hope to see you next Friday as we see the return of Garnet, and sadly kind of need to deal with some more major revelations from Gem Homeworld. So till then, hope you have a good night, and as always, take care.